Hello, my name's Revenge. Happy New Year. Today, I'm going to be talking about communism and how it is a manipulative and predatory ideology. But first, let's discuss why communism is bad. First off, it doesn't value creativity. The average person, as George Carlin once observed, is not particularly good at anything. The perfect job for such a person is on the assembly line, but regardless of the governments under which we live, we all have different aspirations. Some people are perfectly happy sweeping floors, but most of us, justly, want more out of life. Not only money, but fame, glory, and a sense of accomplishment. All of these require at least some creative thought. You may want to be a poet or a painter, but these jobs certainly don't pay the bills, and communism views them as unnecessary and ridiculous. All that matters is building a super powerful nation, and one of the first obstacles that must be removed is what Jefferson called the pursuit of happiness. Number 2, forced collectivization. The most notorious example of forced collectivization is the land reform carried out by Soviets between 1928 and 1933. It was thought that collectivization would maximize the use and potential of the countryside for urban and industrial needs. Russian industry was just taking off, and enormous quantities of food would be required for workers. Masses of resisting landowners, many of them small-scale farmers who worked their own land, died at the hands of executioners. The state's requisition of crops, livestock, and farmland was paid for by the farmers and by the lower class in general, some 10 million of whom starved to death in 5 years. Exactly the same atrocity that took place in communist China between 1958 and 1961. During this time, private farming was outlawed, as it had been in Stalin's Russia, and about 33 million people starved to death in possibly the single most destructive famine in human history. Number 3, you have no rights. Several of these entries are related, and the absence of citizens' rights is at the heart of more than one. In keeping with the last entry, Marx advocated 10 rules in his Communist Manifesto for the forced redistribution of all land and property for the good of the national community. This is theft from the citizens' point of view. They are forced to join the new communist government, whether they like it or not. This, of course, must be done with a might is right frame of mind. Lots of men with guns showed up to take away everything you have. For the glory of the motherland, as the Soviets might have said. Number 4, less incentive to work harder. Incentives, such as a higher pay for doctors, are necessary to give people the energy they need to work hard in a difficult job. When there are no extra incentives available, such as in a communist state where all reap an equal share in what some have worked harder to sow, the people in difficult jobs quickly lose their motivation. For example, workers would stop caring about how thoroughly they inspect the cars on the assembly lines, since it makes no difference to them either way. They are also likely to grow bitter at the government for failing to give them recognition when they do a good job. Revolts become a distinct liability, and many a communist state has fallen because of this problem of reduced incentives. Number 5, militant opposition to imperialism. It doesn't take much to bring the fury of a communist state upon you. In fact, it takes nothing more than simply existing in a capitalist state. The Communist Manifesto advocates the replacement of all governments by communist governments. This has almost always been put into effect internally. The Russian monarchy was overthrown, as were the Republic of China and the Cuban democracy. But the threat is not merely internal. The US need not fear Cuban invasion, but China is indeed a force to be reckoned with. It controls the second largest portion of American debt. And though that only amounts to about 8%, the number is rising. Should they ever call in America's entire debt to them at once, America's already depressed economy would be greatly harmed. Number 6. Indifferent to the environment. A communist state will make up for its inefficient economy by doing whatever is necessary to produce crops and water. In the 1960s, the Soviet communist regime diverted 2 important rivers for irrigation. The Aral Sea, which those rivers fed, has now shrunk to as little as 10% of its original size. It used to be the 4th largest lake in the world. The lesson: rather than letting the efficiency of capitalism into its economic model, the Soviet government chose to extract everything it could from the environment without caring one bit about the health of that environment. Number 7. The economic calculation problem. The relative success of the free market economy is a real-world refutation of Marxist economics. The latter never has sufficient information on the market prices of commodities, and therefore cannot properly ration the distribution of a nation's resources. The only reasonable criticism of the free market is the presence of monopolies, which can raise the prices of their products with little fear of reprisal. But monopolies are just like the central control of a communist government exercises on its whole economy. A true free market ensures that there be checks and balances on the price of goods and services. Number 8. The class struggles going nowhere. Marx founded communist philosophy on the principle that class struggles have been by far the primary causes of all strife, wars, economic woes, and regime collapses. There are popularly thought to be 3 major classes of people: the upper, the middle, and the lower. The upper class has the most of the wealth, the lower class has the least, and the middle class plays the peacemaker between them, maintaining the hope of sanity of the lower class. Without the middle class, heads are chopped. Communism itself does not erase the class struggle as it proclaims, but keeps it going. It does this because it is a government. There must be a group of people in charge, and it's likely that this group enjoys its power. By maintaining their power, the leaders of a communist state separate the population into at least 2 classes, themselves as the upper class, and preferably everyone else in the lower class. Communist states have generally not featured a middle class, and its absence allowed for the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917, the Chinese revolutions of 1949, the Cuban revolutions of 1953 and 59, and a host of others. All these revolutions ended with the rise of a communist state, and all of them were the ruin of their respective nations, because the communists themselves became the very same brand of elitist upper class they disposed of. Number 2. Mass murder. Communist rule may be directly blamed for the deaths of at least 85 million people in the 20th century. Stalin alone murdered about 20 million people, although other estimates range from 53 million to 80 million. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge seized power in Cambodia and set out to establish a communist utopia. They immediately committed genocide on their own people. At least 2 million were executed by brutally primitive methods, in keeping with the Khmer Rouge's anti-technology stance. Many of the victims were murdered merely for wearing glasses, and intelligence was deemed a direct and serious threat to the Khmer Rouge. And let's not forget Chairman Mao. He may not be as evil as Stalin, but he was the very definition of indifference towards humanity. His quote-unquote great leap forward caused the deaths by starvation of 45 million Chinese civilians. Number 10. Karl Marx was wrong to begin with. Marx's doctrine is fraught with faulty logic, loopholes, and unsolved problems. His idea of economics is based on the labor theory of value, which asserts that a car, for example, should cost more than a TV because more labor is needed to produce it. But this is an oversimplification of the market. Sam's Choice Cola tastes almost identical to Coca-Cola, but costs half as much. The labor is the same, but people are happy to pay twice as much for the only difference, the brand name. The same holds true with medicine. In the same way, tennis shoes can cost over $200 in the US despite being made in China or Taiwan for only about $3 to $10. Why do they cost so much? Because the industries that own them sell them based on how highly they are in demand by the public. That's why they have athletes endorse their products to make them more desirable to the athletes' fans. This is expressly why Marxist communism has caused the utter collapse of so many national economies. It thinks in broad strokes and fails to tell one subtlety from another. This, first and foremost, is because communism is not grounded in reality. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to the reason why I made this video. A few days before New Year, I came across this Tumblr post espousing how capitalism is worse than sin itself. Mind you, I censored out their name, mainly for the sole purpose of not giving them attention, but also to keep people from harassing them, which is And on top of this, all the hyperlinks featured in this screen cap lead to blogs and left-leaning websites, and you should know, if you're a debater, that you should never, ever use blogs for sources. But anyway, I decided to refute this post by explaining why communism is bad, using the exact same information that I just relayed to you. Unsurprisingly though, when I go to respond to other people who have reblogged this post in favor of communism, I find out that I am blocked by the OP. This shows you three things. 1. Communists can't back up their ideas. 2. Communists have no faith in their ideas, or confidence for that matter. And 3. Communists don't want to have a conversation, they want to control the conversation. The maker of this post saw me as a threat to their ideology. And rather than engage me in a conversation or try to educate me on why I'm wrong, which I'm not, let alone try to refute my argument, they block me because they know they can't contest me. But they were surely willing to pick on an easy target when it comes to them. Communists are all too eager to stomp all over intellectually inferior opponents. But when someone can actually challenge their ideas, they run and hide. Communists literally prey on your ignorance. If you're economically and socially ignorant, they will crowd around you like a bunch of hungry scavengers. But if you actually know what you're talking about, they will run away from you like a bunch of pansies, because they know they cannot challenge you. Communists are intellectual predators, and their prey is the ignorant. What's the point of you espousing an opinion when you can't even defend it? If you can't take a stand and defend your ideas, that probably means that your ideas are trash. So the next time you talk to a communist, just remember, they don't know shit about what they're talking about. They are just indoctrinated sock puppets, former prey converted into predators. Opportunistic, intellectual swindlers. Slaves to an ideology that is based on faulty logic and lies. An ideology that will eventually betray them. But that about wraps up this video. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And if you're feeling generous, be sure to check the description for not only my sources that I used in this video, but for my Bandcamp, PayPal, and Patreon. This is Revenge, and I hope to hear from you soon.